In October 2018, a Boeing 737 MAX fell out of the sky off the coast of Indonesia. 189 people died. 5 months later, a second one crashed on takeoff from Addis Ababa. 157 more. 346 people total. And when investigators started pulling at the threads, they found something that had nothing to do with engineering. Engineers had been writing to each other privately things like, "I'd be shocked if the FAA passes this turd." They knew. They just didn't feel safe saying it when it mattered. That's what this video is about. Not a plane crash, but the conditions that made it possible. And I'm going to show you exactly what that condition looks like, because the same pattern almost certainly is running somewhere in your organization right now. I'm Manya Chylinski. I survived the Boston Marathon bombing. What that experience taught me about fear, silence, about what it actually costs a person to speak in a room where the consequences are unclear, is what I bring to leaders dealing with disruption. I've spoken at South by Southwest, worked with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley on federal post-disaster mental health legislation, and spent years studying the human side of crisis leadership. This is the work. And here's what we're covering today. 5 things most leaders get wrong about psychological safety and what to do instead. By the end, you will see your culture differently. And here's something most people miss when they hear psychological safety. They think they already understand it, and that assumption is dangerous. So let's start with a mistake that's probably already costing you. Number 1, when you say psychological safety to a senior leader, many of them get uncomfortable. And that's understandable, because the version that's been sold to a lot of organizations sounds like, be nicer, reduce tension, make people feel comfortable. And you're probably thinking, if that's what it means, that's a trade-off with performance. And you're right to push back on that. But here's what a lot of people don't realize. That version isn't what psychological safety actually means. Psychological safety and accountability aren't opposite ends of one dial. They're 2 completely separate dials. And the reason most cultures fail isn't because leaders choose the wrong end of the spectrum. It's that they don't realize that they are 2 separate dials at all. So if accountability is high, but safety is low, you get burnout. People hit their targets, but they hide their problems, and eventually something breaks. When safety is high, but accountability is low, and this is the one no one warns you about, you get what I call the comfort trap. Happy team, strong morale, good relationships, and nobody's telling the truth. The only zone where real performance lives requires both dials turned up. High accountability, high psychological safety. One leader I came across put it this way: my job isn't to have the team work for me. My job is to work for them, to make their professional lives better and hold them to standards that make that work matter. And that's not a trade-off. That's what holding both things as important actually looks like. The first question isn't, do we have psychological safety? It's, which dial is actually low on your team right now? That answer changes everything about what you do next. It gets messier, because even leaders who understand both dials are walking into a trap that they didn't build. So number 2, even if you understand what psychological safety really means, you've probably seen it used in a way that makes you want to throw the whole concept out. The term has been weaponized, and it's happening in 2 directions at once. One direction is what leaders complain about most. Someone gets corrective feedback, and they call it psychologically unsafe. A manager pushes back on a bad idea, say, and the employee says the pushback made them feel unsafe. And when that happens enough times, leaders are going to stop giving honest feedback. And it isn't because they don't care, but because the word unsafe has become a way to end conversations instead of improve them. And that's a real problem. But direction 2 is less talked about and more damaging. Organizations brand themselves as psychologically safe. They run trainings, put it in their values, and the CEO sends an all-hands email about speaking up. And then someone speaks up, and nothing happens. Or something does happen to the person who spoke up. That's performed safety. And it's more corrosive than no safety at all, because it teaches people that the language of safety is itself a trap. Now you might be thinking, okay, so our training just isn't the right training. We need a better program. That's not quite the right conclusion. The reason most safety initiatives fail isn't the program itself. It's that the program is probably targeting the wrong things. Psychological safety training aimed at employee behavior is like giving someone better running shoes to outrun a car. The system needs to change. The managers need to change. The question isn't whether your people know how to speak up. The question is whether the actual consequences of speaking up have changed. And when they haven't, no training is going to move that needle for you. There's one version of this failure that's even harder to spot, and it's one a lot of leaders never even think to look for. It's number 3, the cozy club. Most leaders know what a fear culture looks like. Quiet meetings, no one volunteers, bad news, visible tension in the team, and the signals are there if you look for them. But the culture that actually destroys organizations from the inside is one that gives you no signals at all. The cozy club. High safety, low accountability. The team gets along well, morale is good, nobody's leaving, and nobody's surfacing hard truths either. Because in the cozy club, everyone has quietly done the math. Speaking up costs more than staying quiet. They might not fear punishment, but they've learned that honesty doesn't actually change anything, so they stop. And the silence that replaces it from the outside looks exactly like harmony. A fear culture gives you signals, flinching, turnover, visible tension. The cozy club gives you good engagement scores and a team perfectly aligned around not rocking the boat. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. If your team rarely disagrees, that might not be a sign things are going well. It's the cozy club telling you what you want to hear. So what now you might be thinking, okay, but my team does push back sometimes. We have real debates. So hold on to that thought. Because what I'm about to show you is the version of this that survives even in organizations that think they've solved it. Number 4, the Boeing test. Boeing had policies. They had value statements. The CEO was publicly urging employees to use their voices and speak up. 346 people still died. Before Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas in 1997, the company had a genuinely strong safety culture, one they were rightly proud of. Engineers felt heard, problems were surfaced, quality came first. After the merger, the priorities shifted. Finance took over from engineering. Employees who raised concerns found themselves pushed out. So when the 737 MAX was being built, engineers did what people do in unsafe environments. They talked to each other. This airplane is ridiculous. Someone else said, I'll be shocked if the FAA passes this turd. Someone else said, would you put your family on a MAX simulator trained aircraft? I wouldn't. These weren't anonymous complaints. These were messages between colleagues who knew what they were looking at and had nowhere safe to take it. In June 2018, a senior manager named Ed Pearson emailed the general manager of the 737 program. In it, he raised concerns about the pressures of the schedule, worker fatigue, and a factory that he described as being in chaos. And he said, frankly, right now, all my internal warning bells are going off. And for the first time in my life, I'm sorry to say that I'm hesitant about putting my family on a Boeing airplane. His advice to shut down production went unheeded. 4 months later, Lion Air Flight 610 crashed into the Java Sea. 189 people died. 5 months after that, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed on takeoff from Addis Ababa. 157 more. 346 people total. A 2024 FAA panel found no objective evidence of a foundational commitment to safety that matched Boeing's own descriptions. That same pattern can show up in operating rooms. If a surgical team doesn't feel safe flagging a concern mid-procedure, people get hurt. The stakes are identical, the industry is different. Boeing failed not because its leaders didn't know what psychological safety was. They failed because the actual consequence of speaking up never changed. So here's the test that matters more than any survey or training. Think about the last time someone told you something you didn't want to hear. What happened to them? Did they ever bring you another problem after? That interaction tells you more about your culture than any engagement score. And here's what that test doesn't tell you. And this is the part most conversations about psychological safety don't even reach. Number 5, shame. So why does this keep happening? Why do leaders invest in psychological safety, measure it, talk about it constantly, and still end up with cultures where people don't feel safe to speak? Because they're treating what I call the shame gap as if it was a knowledge problem. Workshops assume that if leaders just knew the right behaviors, they'd do them. But the reason leaders don't create safety cultures usually isn't because they don't know how. It's that doing so requires them to become genuinely vulnerable, to not have an answer, to sit with someone's distress without immediately trying to fix it, to hear bad news and not punish the messenger. And most leaders have been trained, explicitly or implicitly, that strength means never showing any of that. So instead, they perform it. They say, I don't have all the answers in an all-hands meeting. They schedule listening sessions, and employees watch. Because people are extremely good at detecting the difference between performed openness and actual openness. Here's what performed safety looks like in practice. A new employee didn't know the answer to a partner's question. She said she'd follow up and get it for him. The partner started yelling, close enough that she could feel it. She reported it to a manager she trusted. The manager acknowledged it and said they'd spoken to him, and then explained that nothing further would happen because that partner was too important to the organization. That employee never said anything out loud after that. She didn't have to. The message was clear. Her well-being was worth less than his convenience. And here's what leaders miss about that moment. You don't see it. What happens inside someone when they realize it isn't safe to speak? That isn't visible. It's physical for that person, a buzzing feeling, the urge to leave, a quiet decision to stop trying. But the leader has moved on. The employee moves inward. And that seals the feedback loop. The less people say, the more your dashboard is going to show green. And the more that dashboard shows green, the more the leader believes the culture is working. There's one specific version of this worth naming: performed listening. A leader holds a listening session, people show up, they share, nothing happens. Not out of malice, but the leader just never closed the loop, never explained what they heard, never said what would happen next. Here's what people actually need, and it isn't agreement, it's acknowledgement. Tell them what you heard. Tell them the key themes you took away from it. Tell them what happens next, even if the answer is we're still working on it. Agreement, optional. Acknowledgement is not. So here's the only audit that actually matters. Think about that last person on your team who brought you a real problem. Did they find out what you did with that? Did they ever bring you another problem? That's your culture. Not the values on the wall, that interaction. Psychological safety has gotten a bad reputation because it, in some cases, has gotten stretched into something it was never meant to be. It became a comfort contract. It got weaponized. It got packaged into training programs that target the wrong thing. None of that means the concept is broken. The concept is exactly right. But what's broken is the way a lot of organizations have chased it, performing the behaviors while leaving the consequences unchanged. Safety isn't built in a training room. It's built in that moment after someone tells you something you don't want to hear. It's whether you close the loop. It's whether the person who flagged a problem last quarter is still flagging problems this quarter. That's the whole game. Now, there's a question this video doesn't answer. What do you do when you're not at the top? When you can see the problem clearly, but you don't have the authority to change the system? That's a different conversation, and it's the one we're having next.